What's up, guys? Mickle here. And last night, the SEC filed their last-ditch effort to convince Judge Torres to let them appeal her decision in the Ripple SEC case. In this video, we're going to go over the highlights from that filing because there were some gems in this thing where the SEC was once again acting like complete hypocrites. But we're also going to go over what is the SEC's motivation for actually filing this thing. There are a ton of lawyers out there saying right now the SEC doesn't have a chance of actually winning this appeal. We're going to go over what the SEC's true intentions were with filing this thing, because they actually put something in this brief that really kind of gives away their game plan here. In this video, we're going to go over that and go over all the different opinions on Twitter from all the legal experts all about this ruling. Make sure to stick around for this whole thing. There is some very important information here. Like always, your support means so much to this channel. If you enjoy these videos, make sure to take a quick second to like this video and subscribe to my channel. It's really going to help me out so much. Also, if you ever need a good place to buy some XRP or the Flare token, make sure to check out my favorite exchange Uphold down in the description of this video. With that said though, let's jump right into it, and I hope you guys enjoy the content. So I want to start this video off and jump into legally why the SEC claims they are filing this appeal. And just so you guys know, typically when you file an appeal to a case, you need the case to be completely over. Right now, we know that this case is actually going to trial, so technically to do a normal appeal, the SEC should have waited until trial finished. The SEC is essentially doing an emergency appeal here. It's called an interlocutory appeal, so they need a really good reason for why they need an appeal now. The SEC is actually claiming in this brief that they just filed to Judge Torres that the reason why they need this appeal right now is essentially because Judge Torres' ruling was so broad. They claim that because Judge Torres' ruling was so broad, it's creating a whole bunch of ambiguity in the market right now and confusing participants. So we'll get into whether or not that even makes sense in a second, but I want to start off and actually go over something Bill Morgan just put out there because this is really important to understand. Bill Morgan actually broke down the SEC's argument here, and without going through his entire tweet thread, essentially what he came up with is the SEC is essentially twisting Judge Torres' ruling. Judge Torres was extremely specific in how she applied the Howey test to each one of Ripple's sales, and the SEC just doesn't like that this happened. The SEC is trying to ignore the fact that Judge Torres was actually extremely specific in applying the Howey test and instead twisting her ruling and saying it's broad in this request for an appeal. The main reason the SEC is doing this is because the SEC knows they don't actually have grounds to appeal what Judge Torres put out there. Judge Torres applied the law, the Howey test, to each one of Ripple's specific sales and came away with the conclusion that most of Ripple's sales were in securities. Now, because Judge Torres was so specific and because Judge Torres applied the Howey test to each one of these sales, technically the SEC shouldn't be allowed to appeal this right now. So the SEC in this request for the appeal is essentially twisting Judge Torres' ruling, saying she wasn't specific, and I think Bill Morgan nails it right here. He said, "I think you are struggling in appeal-related arguments when you are mischaracterizing the court's legal conclusion you seek to appeal. The SEC is in trouble in this motion." So essentially he's saying if the SEC is resorting to twisting Judge Torres' ruling, it clearly shows they're probably not on the right side of the law here, and I just think it's important to start here because the SEC is requesting this extraordinary circumstance appeal right now. They're trying to get this passed because they know they're in deep trouble in this case. But what Bill Morgan is pointing out here is you don't have to twist the facts if you're on the right side of them. The SEC is twisting the facts here because they're clearly not on the right side of the law. So now let's get into some of the crazier things the SEC put in this brief, because I think some of them was pretty funny. The first one was definitely that the SEC accused Ripple of prolonging the litigation in an attempt to waste the SEC's resources. Right here, the SEC claims that Ripple is trying to prolong litigation so they can keep selling XRP. Well, we know the SEC is the one who delayed this case time after time. Funny enough, they're actually the one appealing this case, making it take even longer. So this is just one of the most hypocritical statements out there. This once again shows that the SEC, like the court said, is hypocritical and doesn't have a faithful allegiance to the law. I don't even know why you would put something in a brief. I mean, there's no way Judge Torres isn't going to see this and just laugh at the agency. It really does show they're complete narcissists and just expect the court to agree with them because they're the SEC. They expect to get away with making these absurd statements, but we all see right through them. This was pretty wild, and this is one of the biggest things just going crazy on Twitter right now. Now, another pretty funny thing being put out there by Stuart Alderati right now is, if you guys remember in the beginning of the video, I said the SEC is requesting this emergency appeal because they are claiming Judge Torres' ruling brought ambiguity into the market, but Stuart Alderati points out the obvious here. He says, after years of the chairman running around saying the rules are clear, the SEC now cries that an appeal is urgently needed to resolve these knotty legal problems. Essentially, the SEC has been running around forever saying the rules are super clear, the rules are super clear, all these cryptocurrency companies need to follow the rules, and now in this brief, the SEC is claiming it's an absolute emergency that they're allowed to appeal because suddenly there's legal uncertainty around cryptocurrencies. It's a total joke, it's totally hypocritical, and once again, we just see the SEC acting as a bad faith actor. The next thing I want to point out is kind of the reason why the SEC is doing this whole thing, because obviously they put out a bunch of reasons for why they're doing this that don't really add up. We clearly went over the fact that the SEC shouldn't be allowed to appeal this. They're twisting Judge Torres' words in order to appeal this, and they've clearly been on the wrong side of the law on most of these issues, especially how they've been communicating them to the market up until this day. So what's the real reason the SEC is appealing this? Well, actually, Prosper actually pointed this out. This is in a footnote, and I think it really just gives out the SEC strategy. The SEC argues that it's not improper for them to use an appeal to increase the likelihood of a settlement. So I have a feeling they kind of gave away what they're trying to do here. In this statement, the SEC has almost no leverage with Ripple right now going into a settlement. Ripple won on almost every major issue in the Ripple SEC case, and now the SEC is desperately trying to use litigation as a punishment and hold it over Ripple's head. Right now, in the settlement negotiations between Ripple and the SEC has absolutely no leverage. They have no leverage because Judge Torres ruled on Ripple's side in almost every major issue. So the SEC needs something in order to get some leverage back. That's what they're trying to use this appeal for, and they pretty much admit it right here. The SEC is trying to use this appeal as a weapon. They're trying to go to Ripple and say, we're going to drag you through more litigation if you don't settle this case. Now, who knows whether or not Ripple actually wants to settle this case, but the SEC is going to use this litigation, they're going to use this appeal to try to at least strengthen their argument or strengthen what they get out of a settlement. I thought this is pretty interesting because, in my opinion, this is really the only thing that makes sense. If you go through the SEC's arguments for why they need an appeal, nothing checks out. Everything they are saying is nonsensical. They're twisting Judge Torres' rules to even try to file this appeal, so it's clearly not on any legal basis. What they're really trying to do here is just force Ripple into a more favorable settlement for them. Now, the other thing I want to point out here is just how likely is this thing to be successful? How likely is Judge Torres to actually agree with this appeal? And almost every single lawyer I have seen from the XRP community has thought that the SEC won't be successful on this appeal. But rather than just show you what they are saying, I wanted to show you what Mark Fagel had to say about this, because he's been on the SEC side this entire time. He's almost agreed with them on almost every single issue. And he actually tweeted out in response to how likely the SEC was to win this appeal. He said he thinks it's going to be extremely hard for them to actually get this granted, and said meeting the requirements for an interlocutory appeal are extremely hard. The SEC has an extremely high bar to meet to actually get this interlocutory appeal, and what we just went over is they're on the wrong side of most of the facts. Now, I think this is extremely telling because if anyone was to take the SEC side, it would probably be Mark Fagel. Not even he is willing to go alongside with this interlocutory appeal filed by the agency. So the agency has bad facts, they have a high bar to meet, and they're likely only using this litigation as a weapon to force Ripple into a settlement. Let me just say real quick, if I'm able to figure this out and lawyers on Twitter are able to figure this out, Judge Torres is going to be all over this. There is no question in my mind she is going to see right through what the SEC is doing, and I have a feeling if I was to make a prediction, Judge Torres is going to deny the SEC's appeal, and she's actually going to use it as an opportunity to address why other cases do not relate to this case. The only argument the SEC really had on this appeal was that other courts said that other cryptocurrencies could be securities in different circumstances. Think of the Terra Luna case, think of the library case. But what Judge Torres is actually going to be able to do here is say your appeal is denied, and this is why XRP is different from Terra Luna. This is really important. This is one of the biggest places of ambiguity in the market right now. And if the SEC loses on this issue and this case does in fact go to trial, then let me just say right now, I think the SEC is dead in the water at that point. Trial's not going to happen for a year and a half to 2 years from now. And in that time, we're likely going to have a completely different SEC, a completely different SEC chair. And at that point, XRP will already have had clarity for 2 years or something by then. So there's just no chance at that point there's going to be an appeal. Either way, though, I have a feeling we are right around the corner, maybe a month, 2 months from Judge Torres coming out and denying the SEC's request. I don't see, based on anything I am seeing right now, the SEC being successful here. This looked like a desperation move from the SEC to try to force Ripple into a settlement. Whether or not that works, I doubt it. The SEC still has no leverage here. Super interesting though, and once again, it's just funny to see the SEC acting hypocritical and with an unfaithful allegiance to the law. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for coming. I hope you enjoyed this update. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe. It really does mean so much. And for now, Mickle out.